Hey, this is Stu, and I'm here to talk to you about the all-new Magic Bullet Cosmo 2. Now, Cosmo has always been about making people look their best, and version 2 is a ground-up rewrite that's even easier to use and gives more powerful results. So I've got an interview clip here, and the contrasty color correction on this clip has perhaps brought out maybe some unwanted detail on the talent's skin here. So we're going to use Cosmo to clean it up. So let's grab Magic Bullet Cosmo and apply it to the clip. Now, if you're familiar with the previous version of Cosmo, you'll notice a big change right off the bat, which is that when we first apply Cosmo, nothing happens. We have to kick off the process with this skin sample selector here. So I'm going to grab this eyedropper and I'm going to sample her skin. And it's good to get a part of her skin that is kind of right in the middle of the tonal range. She's got a little bit of, I don't know if this is yellow bounce coming off of her blonde hair here, and then a little bit of pinkish color in her cheeks. I'm going to try to get something right in between. I'm going to pick her forehead. And then you can see as soon as I click down the sample, the effect kicks in with some default settings. What I like to do right off the bat is choose Show Selection here. And this shows us the matte that Cosmo is generating to do the correction. And we can probably fine-tune this a little bit. It actually did a really good job of getting just her skin. What I'm concerned about here is that I don't want to smooth her hair, her eyes, or her lips, because those are the areas where your eye really wants to latch on to detail. And if there's still detail there, you'll be a little more forgiving of not seeing it somewhere else. We can dial this selection in with Selection Offset, which controls the range of hues, and Selection Tolerance, which controls how broad the selection is. Now you'll notice that some of the background is being selected too. We can decide later if we think that's an issue. Spoiler alert, it is probably not. So here's our selection. It's looking pretty good. So let's turn off Show Selection. And now let's just inspect kind of the default settings here. And you can see already that the default settings have smoothed her skin a little bit and also unified the colors of her skin a little bit. And all of this is stuff that we have to be very tasteful about and try to do in as natural a way as possible. So Cosmo is broken down into 3 sections. We just went over the first, skin selection, and we've got it selected really well. The next is skin smoothing, and then we have skin color. So we'll talk about skin smoothing first. So obviously the first control here is skin smooth. If I turn this all the way down, I'm not doing any smoothing at all. And that is something you may choose to do. You may only want to use Cosmo for its color correction properties. That's fine. In this case, I'm going to turn up smoothing, I don't know, somewhere in kind of the 33% range. This is really something you can dial in to taste. And you can crank this up really, really high if you want. I'll slide it up to 100. And what you'll notice is that while this is definitely too much smoothing, I think, for my taste, some clients may love this, but you'll notice that we are still preserving important sharp details like the edge of her chin here, the bridge of her nose. No matter how much we crank this up, we are achieving a natural result here. And that's really the big innovation of Cosmo 2, is this all-new smoothing algorithm that preserves contour lines and only smooths out the unwanted details. So again, like I said, that's, I think, too much. But we also have another angle of attack on this, which is this preserve detail slider. So if you want to smooth a lot, you may still want to bring back some natural detail. That's what preserve detail is about. If you crank it up to 100, it's almost like you're not doing any smoothing at all. So this is another way for you to dial in a natural amount of smoothing. Now I'm going to turn off the effect and show you one more time kind of a comparison of where we are now versus where we started. So here she was before, here she was after. And as you can see, the smoothing effect is working really well, but it's also having a side effect, which is that it is flattening out the lighting on her face a little bit. We're losing some of the natural contours of her face, like around her nose, on her cheek. We don't want to do that. We don't want her looking too flat. So we have this slider here called Preserve Contrast. And if you turn that up, what happens is you just bring back some of that natural contouring. So here's Preserve Contrast at 0, and here's Preserve Contrast at 100. So you can turn that up pretty high and still get good results. Now if I turn the effect on and off, you can see I'm changing the shape of her face less, and that is a good thing. So in the smoothing process, again, I'm going to turn this off and turn it back on. There are certain kind of details of skin that we don't want to see, but some of them we really do want to see. We want to still feel like this is natural skin with pores and irregularities that skin has, and this sharpened texture control can do that for you. So I'm going to turn that up a little bit, and what you'll see is that without bringing back any of the unwanted detail, we're sharpening up the natural pores and highlights on her skin and making her look naturalistic and lovely. So here was the before. Here's the after. And the last slider in smoothing is restore noise. So the smoothing process blends pixels together, of course, and if your shot had some natural noise to it, then the smoothing could be kind of a giveaway. There's not going to be any noise in that area. So the restore noise slider just lets you organically bring back some basic kind of noise into the areas that you've smoothed. And this is going to be something that you kind of have to see in motion. I've cranked it up too much here. You can see the noise moving around there. So I'll dial it back down so I think it's just a good match with the rest of the shot. So far so good. Now let's back up a little bit and talk about color. In the skin color section, there's this slider, Automatic Color Correct. Now when we sampled her skin, we told Cosmo what color her skin was. And Cosmo also knows what color skin wants to be on a vector scope. So Cosmo can automatically get you there, and the way it does that is with this automatic color correction feature. The default is 50%, so by default we're kind of nudging the skin color halfway towards what we think is the correct value. So this is something you can totally adjust to taste. If you turn it off, you're not doing any automatic correction. If you crank it up all the way, we're adjusting the skin all the way to what we think is the correct skin tone. There's also full manual control over the color of the skin. So this slider here, skin yellow pink, does exactly what it says. If you move it to the left, the skin turns yellow. If you move it to the right, the skin turns pink. Pick the color that you feel is best. If you want a little help in this, turn on Show Skin Overlay. And then you can see, if I push it to pink, the grid falls off of her face. If I move it to yellow, same thing. If you get it to the point where the grid is perfectly visible, then you know you're in the ballpark of a quote-unquote correct skin tone. Skin Color Unify is going to make the skin colors more similar. Now, because we are protecting her hair and her lips using our selection mat here, we're not going to be worried about bringing those colors too close. So that's a good thing because we don't want to turn her lips the same color as her forehead, and we don't want to change the color of her hair. So if I turn up Skin Color Unify, I'm making her skin color more similar. All right, so let's take one last look at our before and after here. Here's before, here's after. Now remember I mentioned that with the selection mat here that we were getting some of the background in here. So what I want to look at now is whether I think that's an issue. And the truth is I just don't think it's an issue. I can't see any effect on those small background details that got included in the key. If I did think it was an issue, obviously I could just add a Premiere Effects mask and I could easily just mask the areas that I wanted to affect. And Cosmo will happily work with that mat, but I don't think I need it. As much control as Cosmo gives you, oftentimes Cosmo can work really well with just the default settings. So here's a nice HD clip from our friends at Pond 5. I'm just going to drag Cosmo onto here. Again, grab the eyedropper. I'm just going to pick color on her cheek. And right off the bat, everything's just looking better. I can check it. It did a really great job of selecting just her skin, not her hair or her lips. I'm just going to leave those default settings alone, and I'm done. And we've been focusing on the ladies here, but Cosmo can be really effective on male talent as well. Again, I'm going to apply Cosmo, do that initial eyedropper selection. On this guy, I'm not so concerned about the smoothing effect. I'm going to turn that down a little bit, but I really like what it's doing to the colors, and I wanted to show you something here. So notice that his nose is a little bit pink, and notice how his nose didn't get included in the selection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up Skin Color Unify, and then I'm going to grab this selection offset. Without showing you the selection, I just want you to see what happens to his nose here. As I move it back to the left, I just unpinkify his nose a little bit, and I can stop just short of unpinking his lips. Now I've got his nose looking more consistent and still a nice pinkness in his lips. I think this guy's looking great. Here's before, here's after. So Cosmo is a really easy to use, effective way to make your talent look their best, and Cosmo 2 also works really well in Final Cut Pro and DaVinci Resolve. Thanks to our friends at Pond 5 for some of the footage we used in this tutorial.